Good evening, everyone. My name is Hillary Cohen, and I am the Senior Director for Alumni Engagement at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. I thank you all for being with us today. For those of you who've been on for a couple of minutes, what you just saw was a slideshow of some previous live events held at Rutgers University. So we want to thank Bruce Moran for finding those pictures for us. Today, I am pleased to welcome you to the inaugural Alumni in Action panel, The Future of Live Entertainment, featuring Chancellor Christopher J. Molloy. Chancellor Malloy received his bachelor's degree in pharmacy and his Ph.D. from Rutgers. He joined Rutgers in 2007 as Dean of the Ernest Mario School of Pharmacy. In 2011, he was appointed interim provost for biomedical and health sciences and successfully managed the complex integration of Rutgers and most of the former University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. He served as interim chancellor of Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences and then Senior Vice President for the Office of Research and Economic Development until his appointment as Interim Chancellor in July 2018. In February 2019, Chancellor Malloy was officially appointed Chancellor of Rutgers University in New Brunswick, where he oversees 50,000 students, 11,000 faculty and staff, and an annual budget of almost $2 billion. Under Chancellor Malloy's leadership, Rutgers New Brunswick continues to be a national research powerhouse steeped in history, innovation, and diversity. If you have any questions for our presenters this evening, we ask that you please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to accommodate as many questions as possible. For your convenience, this presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Rutgers Alumni YouTube channel. You will receive an email with a link to that channel following this presentation. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Chancellor Malloy.
Thank you very much, Hillary. And it's a pleasure for me to actually be here this evening for this new inaugural program, this new alumni series, Alumni in Action. And again, the future of live entertainment is a very timely topic. And we have a great panel of outstanding New Brunswick alumni to discuss the topic. Again, it's very exciting for me to be here, to be at a function with some old and new friends, alumni friends, and I'm looking forward to welcoming them. I think they can turn their pictures on as I call their names. But briefly, our panelists tonight, and a very exciting panel, are Kelly Blythe, Livingston College 2004 alum, Director of Communications and Community Engagement at the State Theater of New Jersey. Tracy Clark, Douglas College 2000, Interim Executive Director of New Brunswick Cultural Arts Center in New Brunswick. Elliot Greene, Rutgers College 71, Chief Operating Officer of the Shubert Organization. And Bruce Moran, Rutgers College 77, President of Live Nation Entertainment, Latin America. Welcome, welcome all of you. I'm also pleased to introduce my co-moderator, a relatively newcomer to Rutgers actually, Dean Jason Geary of the Mason Gross School of the Arts. Jason Geary joined us in 2020 after serving as the director of the University of Maryland School of Music and Associate Dean for Graduate Studies, Equity and Inclusion at the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater and Dance. Jason's lectured and published widely on German music and culture and has received several prestigious fellowships to support his work, including a Fulbright grant and a membership at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. Dr. Geary holds a degree in piano performance from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music and a PhD in musicology from Yale. Rutgers is extremely lucky to have Dean Geary join us. I've been thrilled with how he has managed through this pandemic in his first year. Jason, I'd like you to talk a little bit about that and introduce us to this evening.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to do that, and really excited to be here with this very distinguished panel and with all of you friends and supporters of Rutgers New Brunswick. So I'm humbled and honored to be serving as Dean of Mason Gross School of the Arts. I must say, coming into a role like this in the midst of a pandemic is challenging, to say the least. You know, one of those challenges has been around just creating community. And so very early on, I met with all of the full-time faculty and staff one-on-one via Zoom, and students as well, groups of students, town halls, all in virtual settings, just to get a sense of the place. And I have to say that I've been, absolutely amazed by both the reception that I've received, the warmth, but also just the creativity, the imagination, the resilience, the really amazing ways in which faculty, staff, and students have responded to the limitations posed by the pandemic. So I'll say just a couple of points that I want to highlight about what's been happening at Mason Gross and sort of how we have been responding. So last fall, in the summer into the fall, we were almost entirely virtual with courses, performances, all of our activities taking place online. And we have slowly but surely begun to welcome students back on campus, obviously following COVID protocols and without audiences right now. So our live events have looked differently than they have, but that's of course the case across the board here. And a couple of things that I will note is, one is that I've been so heartened by the way in which these restrictions have actually fostered greater collaboration across the school. I have seen students reach across departments in ways that I don't think has ever quite happened. And it's this, this new setting, again, necessity being the mother of invention, that has propelled these activities. And just to give one very short example, the dance BFA students every year perform a thesis concert, which they obviously would do in person. Without having the ability to do that this year, they wound up working with students in filmmaking, with lighting designers from the theater department, with composers from the music department, with visual artists, really the breadth of the school to create these stunning and just really compelling pieces of art, both in our spaces and in outdoor settings. So it's been truly inspiring to see that. And another thing I'll note is that we have had and been having many conversations around issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion, responding not only to the events over the summer, but also responding to a longstanding need in academia and in the arts in particular. And so we now have a standing school-wide equity, diversity, and inclusion committee that includes faculty, staff, and students, and that has been charged by me to come up with a strategic plan around finding ways in which we can make our curriculum and programming more diverse and more inclusive. So I'm really excited about the opportunities that lay ahead, and I'm excited to hear from others. This is, I've given you just a taste, a brief sampling of some of the things and some of the developments that have emerged as a result of the pandemic. And I want to turn now to our very distinguished alumni and panelists and give you an opportunity to not only hear more from them, but to learn a little bit more about them as we contemplate together the future of live entertainment. So with that, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to say a little bit about their career paths from Rutgers, right? So what was that trajectory? What was the path that led you from Rutgers to where you are now? If you could say a little bit about that and give us a little bit more insight into each of the perspectives that you bring. And I'd like to start with Elliot.
Well, thank you, Dean. Thank you, Chancellor. It's really nice for me to be here with you this evening or this afternoon. I actually was going to begin by talking about my journey through Rutgers before I got to what happened afterwards, but I'm going to truncate that a little bit. I did have my senior year, which was 1971, there was a bit of an economic downturn in the States, and hiring was not all that robust. I probably had 15 or 16 on-campus interviews. And I had a bit of a handicap because I wanted to be a CPA. I wanted to be an accountant. And the Rutgers program at that time did not provide for any such thing. If you wanted to be trained for a profession, you needed to become an educator or an engineer. Virtually everything else required postgraduate work. And I had little interest at the time in postgraduate work. So I took a lot of courses at night school, at University College, so that I could at least sound like I knew what I was talking about in my interviews. Eventually, I was hired by a firm called Laventhal, Kreckstein, Horwath, and Horwath. And at the time, they were the 9th largest accounting firm. Then there were the Big 8, and then everybody else. Laventhal was almost the Big 8, but not quite. So I started my career in New York as a public accountant. And I had 2 Rutgers aha moments. The first came immediately upon my hiring, when the hiring partner told me that I clearly was not the most qualified candidate, but because I had gone to Rutgers and I had a liberal arts background, he was interested in hearing a different perspective than what he'd been hearing from graduates from Pace and other accounting-centric schools. I was one of 4 people hired in a firm that had just laid off 30 people. So that was pretty cool. 6 or 8 months later, I was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was on an audit of a public company. We were doing some SEC disclosures. There were 10 of us sitting around the table. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning, so we were a little tired, to say the least. And one of my colleagues made some sort of comment, and my response was cogito ergo sum. And 11 people around the table looked at me like I had 3 heads. Nobody knew. Nobody had taken Great Philosophers with Dr. Weber, which I had done my freshman year. And that was my second aha moment, that the liberal arts education that I had, the 2 years before declaring a major, and then declaring an accounting major in a school that didn't have one, seemed to be okay. I went on to take some additional postgraduate classes. I became a CPA. And at that point in time, I decided I didn't want to really practice in public accounting. During my tenure in Laventhal, one of my clients was the predecessor organizations to the Shubert Organization. So it was all the small companies owned by the Shubert brothers, or now the estate of the Shubert brothers. And frankly, it was my least favorite client. It was in 44th Street in the Theater District in the early 70s. And as my former chairman would say, the place was a sewer. The city was in disarray. Really, nobody was going to the theater. And the Shuberts themselves were in pretty serious financial difficulty. About the time that the Shuberts were rescued, around the time that Chorus Line opened at the Shubert Theater, I was offered a position as assistant controller. And despite the fact that they were my least favorite client, I thought that I could be additive, along with my current boss, Bob Wankel, who happened to be my supervisor during the audits. So now Shubert is, the 2 senior people at Shubert are both accountants as opposed to lawyers, which has been the former history. So anyway, I started out as assistant controller. I've moved up through the ranks, and I'm currently chief operating officer. And I thank Rutgers for all of that.
Thanks so much for that, Elliot. Clearly still thinking, right? And that introduction to philosophy did you well. Let's, if we can, move to Kelly to say a little bit about her path from Rutgers, a more recent graduate.
Hello. First, I gotta say, Chorus Line, love that show. Great show, Elliot. But my name is Kelly Blythe. I am the Director of Communications and Community Engagement at State Theater New Brunswick in downtown New Brunswick. Fun fact, I did not know that the State Theater existed while I went to Rutgers. Somehow I grew up doing theater and it was part of my life. And then I came to Rutgers and I focused on academics and I just forgot all about theater. And throughout my Rutgers time, I was interning at Rutgers University Press. So I was doing marketing and PR for books, which I love. I'm a book person. I'm still in a book club today. I love it. but it wasn't quite what I wanted. I enjoyed books, but I didn't enjoy that scene. So one of my supervisors, she actually left when I was still going to school, and she went to the State Theater and told me all about it, and I was fascinated. So I'm getting ready to graduate. It's 2004. I'm getting ready to graduate, and she says, "You know, I just got a job opening for communications assistant. Would you like to apply?" And honestly, it was like the easiest. Sure, you know what? I haven't even thought about what I'm going to do, after graduating. So I applied. I got the job. I graduated May 20th and started at the State Theater June 1st, and I have been there ever since. I am coming up on my 17th year at the State Theater, and much like Elliot, I moved up to the ranks and have taken on many roles through the years, as Tracy will tell you. And I just love it there. I fell in love with that place. I have met so many people, not only the artists, but the people that have the roadies, the tour folks, and it's really unlike any other job that I could ever imagine jumping into and staying with for 17 years. And I really, I enjoyed it. And if it wasn't for Rutgers and being where I was at that time, I wouldn't be here today.
So great to hear these different pathways and the success that they've brought. Bruce, can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sorry about that. Yes, hi, I'm Bruce Moran. I have been a music industry geek my entire life, since my time at Rutgers College. I slept a lot my freshman year at Rutgers, and a senior roommate told me, go out and join a club. So I joined the concert organization, which we renamed RUMP, Rutgers University Major Programs, which I believe it's gone back to its previous incarnation. But before I knew it, I was running RUMP, and in my time, we promoted and produced Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Harry Chapin, Southside Johnny, a whole assortment of people, Paul and Oates. We did some speakers, Gene Roddenberry, Tom Wolfe, and others. And having graduated from Rutgers, I was lured to John Shear's promotion shop. He was at that time the major promoter in New Jersey. I worked for John for some time, and we opened up both Giant Stadium and the Meadowlands Arena. I left and became an agent at ICM, and notable among my clients, I had Clarence Clemens, who is we all love from New Jersey. I went from there to Madison Square Garden, where I was the vice president for music and managed all of the music offerings at the building. At that point, I had an interesting left turn and ended up working with OCESA, the major concert promoter in Mexico. So we basically established Mexico as a major concert destination, particularly Mexico City. It all exploded when we had Madonna play 3 shows, and 4 days later, Paul McCartney played 2, each to 50,000 people a pop. So we had 250,000 people attend those shows, and it was all it all began from there in Mexico. After a stint there, I was lured away by Live Nation, the global concert company. I am the president of Live Nation Latin America, so I toiled south of the Rio Grande, doing the likes of, in recent years, Coldplay, Madonna, U2, Paul McCartney, and more, in South America and Mexico and the Caribbean. But it all started when I started selling tickets in front of the Rutgers Commons for concerts at the College Avenue Gym.
It's great, and boy, the stories I'm sure you could tell, but that's for a different panel, right? Tracy, let's hear a little bit from you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Tracy Rusho Clark, and I'm the Interim Executive Director from New Brunswick Cultural Center, as well as I have a new hat that we'll talk about later from the Arts Institute of Middlesex County. I graduated in 2000 as a Douglas graduate, very proud. And my major was Spanish and a concentration in business. And I wanted to go to the city, and I got a job in New York City because I wanted to do that whole hustle and bustle and that commute. And then 9/11 happened. So then I had to come home because I wanted to give back in some way. And through a whole lifespan at that time of volunteering, and I wanted to look into nonprofit and how I could really help in some way, whether it's through education or the arts. And I reached out to an organization called New Brunswick Development Corporation, and they had New Brunswick Cultural Center under their wings, as well as New Brunswick City Center. So I started there. And I've been there ever since. And so it's like 16 or 17 years, which is in the arts industry, that's just scratching the surface. That's not a lot of time. And what the Culture Center major mission is to help and engage with emerging as well as already established organizations. So simply like Kelly from the State Theater, Mason Gross, George Street Playhouse, American Opera Ballet, and Crossroads Theater Company, and the newly formed New Brunswick Performing Arts Center, where I happen to be at today. And just, we all work together, especially very closely, especially with all our events, as well as working with the community and different organizations and arts organizations, cultural organizations, and historic organizations. So it's all about community engagement with us, as well as working with engaging with government entities, cultural entities, and we're very happy to be here. And that's just a little bit about me.
Tracy, thank you all very much for the opening comments here. I'd like to follow up with the discussion, talking a little bit about how the last year has really changed everything for everyone. I'll just say a few things about the university. Obviously, we had to pivot to a remote environment, and have really, because of the incidence of COVID in New Jersey, really had slightly more than a year ago, gone to all pretty much online education. It was a tremendous change, as Jason talked about earlier, Dean Geary talked about earlier. Students, faculty, and staff have responded beautifully. There's been a tremendous esprit de corps that's developed, even given the pandemic, and we found a lot of silver lining to this response. But of course, we're very much looking forward to getting back to much more face-to-face and live education in the fall, and we have certainly plans for that. And I'm very optimistic and excited about the possibility of us getting to be much more closer to normal as the fall comes on. I'd like to ask the panelists a little bit about how COVID's affected their business. It's obviously been dramatic. But we really, it's important to understand there are probably a little bit of positive news about how there's been some response and some great creativity happening. Maybe I'll do reverse order. Maybe Tracy, you can possibly comment on how things are going, and I want to make sure that we stay connected in New Brunswick, because I really do want to build this this global and local collaboration around the arts that Dean Geary really will help us to chaperone moving forward.
Well, you touched on a great point, Chancellor Malloy, the global and the local, right? So the Culture Center, we have year-round programming that gears towards outdoor events as opposed to being inside. So we have Hub City Sounds that are in parks in the area. We also have the Windows of Understanding initiative that is geared towards social justice issues that we're facing, like climate change, racial injustice, food insecurity, that we work with in different venues outside, as well as different hosts and restaurants. It was around March 13th where we had to decide, because we thought we were only going to be closed for, we'll just take a 2-week hiatus so we can just plan better. Let's just plan better. And then 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks, and we said, okay, so we have a whole series of events that we need to continue to have. And we also have the mission and the responsibility to our artists, because if the timing is going further and further now, our artists don't have any opportunities, because theaters were closing and gigs were being canceled, and we still needed to support. So that's where we went to the virtual platform. And actually, to Capacity Interactive's credit, that's where we learned StreamYard and learned streaming through YouTube and did our whole virtual programming. And I must say, it's almost a blessing, because we connected with so many more artists within a span of say 3 to 4 months. We'd already connected and employed over 150 artists, new artists from New Jersey to Canada to Dubai. So it was definitely a nice connection, and the opportunity that we had because of the funding that we had, we were able to do that, and we were able to connect with more artists. So that if we could start from there, and then we build. And
that's fantastic. I'm going to
Mhm.
skip around, so I'm going to ask Elliot here. How about the Shubert Theater, Elliot? Obviously, it's been closed. What are the plans moving forward? What do you see on the horizon? What's it look like in the city, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, interesting. The last performance took place on March 11th. The Broadway League, which is the National Trade Association for legitimate venue operators, producers, general managers, we had a meeting the afternoon of March 12th. There were about 50 people in this room talking about what we're going to do. And it was that afternoon that Governor Cuomo said, shut it down. So in fact, there was supposed to be an opening that night, not one of our theaters, but the musical Six was supposed to open that night. The producer was in the room, and of course he had no choice but to be compliant. So the last performance really took place on March 11th. And at that time, like everyone else, we figured, okay, we'll be shut down for 4 or 5 weeks, and let's keep the home fires burning and get ready to restart. It quickly became evident that that wasn't going to happen with any immediacy. The league formed 40 separate task forces to talk about all kinds of protocols. What are the houses going to look like when they open? What are the safety measures, the security measures? And we've been talking ever since. In fact, I was on 2 league Zoom calls today. However, the good news is there seems to be light at the end of the tunnel. A number of shows have announced they plan on starting performances in September. Just today, I believe, the Fox Theater in Atlanta announced programming for August. So there seems to be an awakening. It really will depend on governments, local, state, and federal, to create guidelines. Broadway will not reopen unless we can do so at 100% capacity. Right now, New York allows 33% with a total of 150 people. Obviously, our economic model does not work. So we're hopeful that between vaccines and herd immunity and a more liberal, if you will, approach to crowds and personal spaces, we believe we'll be able to reopen, probably with patrons wearing masks, probably with contactless ticketing, which, by the way, is something we've been working on, and I think will be one of the improvements in customer engagement going forward. Mm-hmm. Again, though, dependent on governments, because in New York, there are certain rules about contactless ticketing. You have to have paper tickets that you can transfer. So we're working on all of these things. And in the middle of all this, and much to our benefit and everyone else's benefit, we've gotten involved with our own internal EDI, not only at the Shubert Organization, but also at the Broadway League level. We've done a number of things already that we had hoped to do, and there are many more going forward. We have our own committee. We have 15 Shubert folk from various departments, some theater employees, some office employees, and we're working every day and every week on improving how we do it and what we do.
Thanks.
And if I could add one other thing that I forgot to mention during my opening, I actually met Mason Gross. It was not very good circumstances. It was the spring of 1970, and the Vietnam War protests were really getting hot and feverish. And in fact, that terrible tragedy happened at Kent State, and the Rutgers campus was taken over by Students for a Democratic Society. They took over Old Queens and other buildings. And the rumors, I was an inactive participant, that is a bystander. And rumors were that the National Guard and State Police were getting ready to take the campus back. And certainly after the tragedies at Kent State, that was people were afraid. Mason Gross invited everybody to stay in Old Queens, to have a dialogue, and to be his guests. And he completely diffused what could have been a terrible incendiary situation. And I knew him a little bit and had a lot of respect for him, but it was a pivotal moment. He was a great man and deserves the honor of having a school named after him, I have to tell you.
So Elliot, thank you for sharing that. And I'm aware of that story. I came, of course, to Rutgers in 1972, just shortly thereafter you graduated. I also have the pleasure of being in Old Queens, and quite frankly, I'm actually sitting at Mason Gross's desk right now talking to you, which is just a coincidence. And I don't mean to say that I'm as good as or as accomplished as he was the president. Of course, I'm the chancellor. I report to the president of Rutgers. But it's a great story. Let me shift it over to Bruce Moran, who we knew each other back when I had hair. And Bruce, obviously your industry's been affected dramatically. How is it responding? What is your thoughts going forward? And then at some point, I'm going to let Jason take over in a few minutes. But at some point, I need you to help us. How can we get some of these acts back at Rutgers? The business model might not be good enough, quite frankly, but you answer any way you want to answer.
Well, to begin, I've got to say that on March 12th in 2000, whatever it was, it's all a blur now, 2020, I was in Buenos Aires. I woke up that morning to find out that the mayor of the city had pulled our permit for our Maroon 5 show that night. So I spent that day canceling the show. I got on an airplane, I flew to Rio, where we had the Backstreet Boys. The next night they played, and then I spent the whole next day canceling their final show of the tour, which they were very excited to have a sold-out stadium in Sao Paulo. So I flew home and to a different world, obviously. I thought I was being clever. I had a Metallica tour for throughout South America, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, slated for April. And I moved it to December. I said, there's no way it won't play. So we moved it to December of 2020. And since that time, I've moved it to 21, and now I'm about to move it to 22. So anyway, to answer your question, I am living proof that the music business is global today. So I can speak to my world, which is Latin America, and a little bit to the United States and North America. But I have moved Billie Eilish, Harry Styles, Maroon 5, and Metallica tours about 5 times now, and I've got a bunch of other shows as well. So we keep moving things around farther and farther away. With events currently in Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, it is unlikely that we will see any live shows in those markets until 22. We're hopeful that we might be able to do some local Brazilian talent in the latter part of this year, but for the most part, my stuff is being moved to 22. In the US, like you said, light at the end of the tunnel. We foresee business and amphitheaters and festivals in late summer and fall. And the response, obviously, there's overwhelming pent-up demand. You may be aware that The Weeknd announced his 2022 tour the day after the Super Bowl and sold 1 million tickets in a day. Reading and Leeds festivals in the UK are in August. They sold out. Bonnaroo in Tennessee for this year has sold out, fastest sellout they've ever had. But indoor concerts are obviously problematic. Our business model doesn't enable us to do events if we don't have near full capacity. So indoor shows are likely not in the U.S. not to be seen for the most part until next year. But we are hopeful that late this year things will be back to normal in the U.S. and God willing in South America in the first quarter of 22.
And Kelly, how about you? How about the State Theater, and what's the, obviously it's the same situation pretty much there too, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, we're a performing arts center and we present over 300 programs a year. And so just like Bruce was saying, we started doing the reshuffling and rescheduling, and we thought August, August 2020, it's gonna be fine, right? And then it just kept shifting and shifting. And some things just had to be canceled. A lot of things had to just be canceled, except for Cats. Cats, the musical, will definitely be the State Theater one day soon, maybe 2022. But yeah, so it took us quite a while to pivot. We were not set up to do any virtual programming. That wasn't really our thing. Our tagline is the power of live performance. So, we didn't have someone on staff to do that. And so we took to August and started doing some virtual programming, and we were a little outside the box with trivia nights and Broadway panels and anything we could do to keep people engaged. And the positive side of that is that we grew our patron base around the country. We have our, set folks that come from New Jersey or the tri-state area, but we were seeing people from Chicago and California and Michigan, and just loving the access that they had to the art still on their computers. And I can see that is definitely a positive. Another positive for us is that we were able to start doing renovations to the State Theater. We received money from Middlesex County to work on big major renovations, including the installation of an elevator. We are a 100-year-old building. We opened in 1921 as a silent movie house, vaudeville house. So we have a lot of upkeep, and one of them was putting in an elevator. We're increasing our accessibility. We are updating our bathrooms. We are also changing our sandbag system. Yes, we still operate on the sandbag system like William Shakespeare and the old pulley system. So we are updating that. And that is, I can tell you it's the number one thing that the crew, we are a union house, and that was the number one thing that the crew had on their lists was replace sandbag system. I can't tell you how many times I've been backstage and heard the sandbag's leaking, the sandbag's leaking. So this is very exciting for us. So that is positive for us, the virtual side and the renovations. Now, like, many of us have been talking about, of course, now we're looking to reopen in September, but what does that look like? We talk every week and it's updated every week. So we'll see.
I wonder if I can jump in with a question really for any of our panelists here. And it's sort of oriented around the point that you were just making, Kelly. And that is, what does the future of our industry, these industries, live performance, what does that look like? And, obviously it's asking you in some ways to get out your crystal ball and, and to sort of, presage the future. But I'm wondering if even now you get insight, or you have insight into ways in which normal as it had been defined is not likely to return, right? What are some of those, those changes, both either positive or negative, that you foresee being with us for some time to come, or perhaps indefinitely? And again, I'll throw this out to anybody who wants to jump in.
I'll dive in. Elliot referenced contactless ticketing. I think that's the future. We're not going to be handling tickets in the same fashion. Depending upon what happens and in the world and pandemics in the future, God forbid, but we could be seeing staggered timed entries to control ingress for shows so that we don't have a huge crowd all coming at the same time. young lady who works for me, Shanti, has been very excited about virtual VIP programs where you have meet and greets online, where you have backstage tours that are on the internet. There'll be an integration of streaming as part of the tour experience, I think, going forward. Tours may conclude with the release of a stream of a show, perhaps at Rutgers, with backstage footage and interviews and so forth as sort of a culmination and, to tie it all up. But I think that, we'll have contactless merchandise sales, and things are going to change. And I guess the kids will still be shoulder to shoulder at the front of the barricade, but maybe not at the concession stand any longer.
Other thoughts? Elliot.
Yeah.
Can I add on?
Yeah, Elliot and then Kelly.
So interestingly enough, not too long ago, I asked our archive to go back and research what happened during the 1918 pandemic. I didn't personally experience it. I'm old, but I'm not that old. So in New York City, theaters did not shut down. The pandemic sort of hit New York in October of 2018. I'm sorry, yeah, 1918. Could have been 2018. In 1918, and the city of New York decided that they were going to take some measures. Staggered performance times was one of them, and it was primarily to keep the crowds out of the subways. Towards the end of October, they started announcing things like, please cough, sneeze, and spit into a handkerchief because we don't want you spreading germs. And if you do, you'll be escorted out of the theater. By the end of November, the pandemic was essentially over. And our reports are that the holiday season in New York was quite robust. Some other cities took different actions. Boston, for example, I think shut down for 8 or 10 weeks, as in some other cities around the country. A little historical perspective.
Yeah,
As
that's
far
really...
as far as the future is concerned, it's hard to believe that Broadway is going to be significantly different than Broadway was. Now, that may be because I'm not a visionary, that's not my job, but we've certainly learned a lot about, virtual engagement, but people pay to see folks on the stage, they pay to hear live musicians, and that's important. That's what we are. And I think at some point in time in the future, that's how it's going to be. One change may be you may not be allowed to go backstage anymore to visit or to get autographs. That's one of the protocols that will be in place when we do reopen in September or so.
Great, and thanks for that historical perspective. Really fascinating. Kelly, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's the State Theater actually came to be because of after that pandemic. We opened in 1921 when people needed the arts. So we're hoping that will bring people back to State Theater as well. But yeah, the touchless systems we're going to be, and it's great timing for us for renovations. We have adjusted our renovations to have touchless systems in our bathrooms, everything with the ticketing and the merch. Concessions is going to be a whole new area, right? So that's definitely going to be something that we're going to be figuring into our plans when we reopen. But a sense of hybrid programming is definitely something that we're going to be looking at. I think it's going to be a while for some of our patrons that are going to want to come back to live performance and being with people. And I think that's just a reality for us. And now that we've dabbled in virtual, I feel like there's nothing that we can't do. And I'm very excited to continue to reach out to the people across the country and let them know about State Theater programming and include them in that programming. So I'm very excited about what the future can bring. But of course, I don't want to get into capacities and all of that, but it's true. We're looking to, slowly but surely move to 100%. I don't know when that will be, but that's going to be the reality.
Yeah. Tracy, what would you like to add?
We recently, this past Thursday, had a performance in the New Brunswick Performing Arts Center. So we came in as a rental, and one of the theaters, there's two, and one of the theaters is 452 seats, but we had up to 100 people only. invite only, and you had to go through certain protocols. You had to do the health screening before you came into the theater, the temperature checks, and we had to shuttle people into the theater directly. So if your doors open at 5:30, you had to be into the doors open to the theater at 5:30. We had a Q&A, we had sanitizing the microphones, and the Brunswick Performing Arts Center continues to put in more safety measures and continues to learn more about. And it's also showing our patrons and the patrons that were coming, we had reserved seats is where you're supposed to sit, as opposed to reserved seats are where you're not supposed to sit. So the whole social distancing concept is a little different. And then with our programming, as Kelly mentioned, we are doing the hybrid format, and as well as offering live stream for this event, because not many people could come out, not many people wanted to come out either, and that's okay. As we slowly but surely, as she said, we're going to come back, and maybe we don't, but we have to figure out how the economic model can fit and how the experience, especially for our guests, can be the best one ever. And this is the time to be creative.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it seems to me one of the things all of you are getting at is that there is something inimitable, right, about the experience of live performance. And that doesn't change, right? Even as we might think about ways in which the kind of the structure, say, around performances and events might change or might have to be adapted, that at its core, that communal experience of coming together and engaging in the arts in some way that moves us and touches our souls, that remains the same. And I think as you've all indicated, folks will be hungry for it.
Another topic that's really come up at the university and something that we're working on together is really the whole concept of equity, diversity, inclusion, community engagement. I know it's something that we'll be following up on. Tracy and Kelly in town, and I just wanted to know your thoughts about how the industries have responded in a positive way or hopefully a positive way about this. I know the university, it's a real commitment that we have to provide access to underrepresented minority students, economically disadvantaged students. And of course, the arts is an area of interest to anyone in a broad section. So maybe anything you've seen in the last years about this? I know it's been a very, very tough year from pandemic, politics, and a controversial, and a lot of controversy, but any of the panelists can respond to this, some of the things you're seeing and thinking about. Maybe Tracy, you have something that you want to
Well, with our programming and our models, our programs are free for a reason. And based on the contribution that we receive, it's on purpose. So it's quite high quality art, cultural and historical content, but free to all, because we truly believe in the access, the affordability, especially where we're at in New Brunswick. We believe that everyone should have access to the arts, and we take it one step further, whether it's outdoor programming, whether it's coming to in the different parks, so you're reaching different neighborhoods, as opposed to saying, come to us, let us come to you. And learning really holistically what is the needs and what are the concerns and what the community really would like. That's not sitting around with like-minded people. That's sitting around with as many people as possible to getting as much input as possible. Being a little uncomfortable with your answers, or your questions, and getting the answers that you may not want to hear, but we have a lot of work to do, especially in the arts, and especially making sure that everyone is represented as much as possible. And that's not a pie in the sky, that's just necessary, if that makes sense. For all of us, to continue in sustainability, we just have to do this work.
So Elliot, have you seen it in your industry that there's been a move here? And
well, very, very, very much so. I mean, there have been a number of new organizations and coalitions of people of color challenging, some in a cooperative way and some in a you have to do this kind of way. All reasonable voices are being listened to, they're being engaged with. Shubert has started a speaker series whereby we've given a platform and a voice for new producers of color. The initiatives with a lot of the, not a lot, with all of the unions and guilds that are on Broadway through the Broadway League. And so I don't want to say we're opening the doors. The doors have always been open, I think, but we are opening them much wider. We're seeking new sources of talent, not just on stage and not just in the pit, but behind the scenes, designers, lighting designers, costume designers, directors, writers. And I think you're going to see a sea change in terms of what's been referred to the whiteness of Broadway.
Bruce, obviously you work in south of the border in Latin America. I mean, is it mostly local talent there? That's local management that you're involved with, or is it a lot of Americans that are working with you down there? What's it like in?
Well, I mean, all my partners locally are native to Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and so forth. But I mean, to the bigger issue for my company, Michael Rapino, our president, has been very, very vocal and very active in working to diversify our company. Obviously, you know, we're a global music company. We do an enormous number of Black artists, hip hop and R&B, and he's made it his life's mission to champion people of color and women. And you know, as horrific as the pandemic has been, there is an opportunity insofar as a number of our lower level staff were furloughed and they've gone on to other positions. And Michael said, well, okay, then if we've got all these open positions, then we've got to try harder to make sure we're bringing in more people of color across the board in every country. And we're obviously we're a global organization, but we've become increasingly active. When I first got into the music business, it was white rock and roll. You know what? Music's not that way anymore, and it never should have been. I mean, but the rock and roll was essentially a creation of Chuck Berry, if you don't mind my saying. So we're in a position today where I think that you're going to see the music industry as a whole become increasingly diversified and for the good.
As a musicologist, I concur with your historical assessment there. Kelly, anything you want to add, maybe from your perspective, which I know obviously encompasses community engagement as well?
Yeah, sure. So before the pandemic, we had created a couple of our community engagement committees, members of the community to form our LGBTQ committee, our African American committee, and our Latino committee. And we were using their, working with them and listening to their voices about what we should do in our programming, on staff, in our choices going forward. And so we have spent this time during the pandemic only meeting more and talking more about programming. And one of the big decisions we made, Tracy knows this, is that we decided to partner with New Brunswick Culture Center on the New Brunswick Heart Festival, which is now going to be is open to the New Brunswick. It's all the community, it's free. And we went virtual last year because we had to, but this year it's going to be hybrid, and it's a free event with music and dance and all kinds of stuff. And that was one of the big pivots for us in participating in that. And like Tracy was saying, making sure we were increasing access to what we were putting out there. And this was one of those big events, and we're looking forward to that in August 15th.
14th.
14th.
And everybody will have access to that show.
Very nice. I think we've come to the point in our conversation where we can begin to engage some of your questions. So I'll kind of step back and we can hear some of those.
Great. Thank you, everyone. This has been an excellent conversation. And I just Want to say that I am currently in New Brunswick and we are starting this just as I heard the train pull up. So you're going to have to forgive me if you hear some noise in the background. So the first question that we received is, in your opinion, when will live performances return? And do you think there will be changes made in capacity? So I was thinking this would be a great question for Kelly. Maybe we can start with you if you think the capacity will be the full theater or limited seating is going to be capacity.
I'd like to think that we would have 100% capacity when we reopen in September, but we're probably looking at a 50 to 75%. 75% is probably more on the optimistic side. But with that said, what does that mean? Does that mean timed entries and exits and all of that? So that is definitely going to be a challenge. I know I'm maybe jumping ahead, but I know that people are interested in if we're be accepting vaccine cards, if they have to present their vaccine cards, and we're not looking to do that right now. I know other venues in the state, in the tri-state area are doing that. That's not on our list right now to do that when we reopen in September, but at this point, that's where we're at.
Elliot, did you want to add to that for Broadway theaters?
Well, I think, as I said before, we will not reopen at less than 100% of capacity. We recently, at our Broadway theater, hosted a New York Pops Up event a week ago Saturday. We had 150 guests, socially distanced, and it was a terrific 35-minute show by Amber Iman and a couple of other singers, and it was great. However, following our current protocols, it took nearly 50 minutes to get 150 people into our theater. That's not a model that will work going forward. And that model, by the way, included either proof of vaccine or a rapid test. That was part of the State Department of Health's requirements in order to host this particular event. We, as a league, as part of our protocols, one of our protocols committees, we're talking about things like, do you take temperatures? Do you need a proof of vaccine? Would you provide rapid tests? We don't know the answer. We know it's a question, but we just don't know the answer at this juncture. Certainly not. We can't read the tea leaves as to what's going to happen in September through December.
Great, thank you. The next question is, I'm wondering, for live shows, do you think there will ever be a general admission section anymore, or will everyone need to remain in their assigned seat at all times? I can't imagine growing up and not going to general admission concerts. Bruce, do you want to start with this one?
I'm happy to. Electric Daisy Carnival, EDC Festival is going to play to 200,000 people a night on May 21, 22, 23. So it's entirely possible that before summer comes, we will have seen people shoulder to shoulder. The dilemma for live event producers is the patchwork response by the government. The fact that you can have a show in Florida without restriction, or in Tennessee, and on the other hand, I went to a Yankee game 10 days ago and was one of the 10% of the people allowed to attend a sold-out game. So I guess it's going to take a little longer for a general admission show to occur in New York City or in New Jersey, but you're going to see festivals that are sold out, Bonnaroo, for example, in Tennessee, this calendar year. So, God willing, we won't have any resurgence in the virus, and these will prove to be safe event experiences for all concerned. But yes, there's no doubt we're gonna have general admission events again, and I don't think the kids will have it any other way, frankly.
That's great. The next question was posed for Chancellor Malloy and Dean Geary, but of course anyone can feel free to jump in. Do you think that students will be able to walk up to a theater at Mason Gross and purchase a ticket for an event that day, or will everything need to be purchased in advance? This kind of goes along with, do you think you'll have to show proof of vaccine? But we'll start with, do you think everything will have to be done in advance where you can walk up that day and purchase a ticket?
That's a question, or you just answered the question?
No,
No.
that's a question.
I'm going to have Dean Geary respond here, but our intention actually at Rutgers, and I, as a medical scientist myself, I remain very optimistic that our vaccination requirements are going to allow the campus to be quite safe in the fall. And I believe that we will be able to allow that to happen. How open will, what kind of seating capacity we'll be able to do in the venues that we have is not yet clarified. But I believe that we will allow live events at some capacity, 50%-ish at least, if not more, depending on how things evolve from a state perspective, as Bruce and others just alluded to. I don't, in terms of the, getting something in paper form or something, that's what the question's about. I don't really see an issue there, quite frankly. This disease is spread by air, in the air. Actually, it's the indoor venues and ventilation that's the issue. But again, I believe that I am optimistic that given the level of vaccination that we should have in New Jersey, at least by the fall, that we should have a quite safe campus to allow there to be a certain level of face-to-face along the lines of things like Kelly has sort of mentioned. And Jason, you can please mention.
Yeah. So you heard it from my boss, but I think he's absolutely right. That the context here will be a slightly different one because of the vaccination requirement that Rutgers has or will have. And so I think that's going to create a scenario where there are some instances where we won't have to be as restrictive. And I do envision that not only will we have, in-person events, again, perhaps not to capacity, but I do envision that students will be able to walk up and get same day, tickets. And the other thing, frankly, is it becomes really difficult to sort of monitor that in many instances. I mean, so this would require for us sort of creating a whole new infrastructure that, I'm not sure would be worth investing in, given that I think we're moving in a positive trajectory. Now, again, one thing we've all learned over the last year plus is a little humility, and one never knows. But I think if we remain on the course that we're presently on, I don't see the need to do that. And I know we don't really have the infrastructure to do it as I sit here right now.
Thank you both. Okay, the next question is, what skills or competencies can students or newcomers to the industry cultivate that might be uniquely relevant in light of the changes happening in media and live entertainment due to COVID-19?
I'd like to jump in really quick. So going back to our virtual programming and the beginning of it, it was the beginning stages. We went virtual, but we had to learn how to go virtual. And thank you to Sarah Farida, who is on our staff at the Cultural Center, as well as the Arts Institute, learned a platform called StreamYard through, like I mentioned before, Capacity Interactive. If there's any digital media platforms that you can learn, any skills that you can learn right now is the time to learn them. I believe there's even new courses around that came out this year around digital media, around streaming, around the different platforms. Even the Zoom is now like life. StreamYard is life. YouTube is life. As many communication devices that you can learn, as many online courses you can take, do it. Because this the hybrid and the live streaming, it's a component that maybe some organizations, we didn't think it was going to be, that we'd have to learn it, but now the community engagement and the outreach is exponential. So learn as many skills as possible for this platform, because it's not going away. We're going to Zoom and do all these live streams indefinitely.
I'd like to add to that. I agree with Tracy with all of that, but I have learned to kind of be a jack of all trades. I am the photographer. I am the social media person. I am the videographer. I am the Zoom operator. I am many of those things. And I continue to grow and learn new things. I am now putting together graphic design, doing graphic design. And that's, something that I really wasn't doing before. So continue to grow. And I know we have this like love-hate relationship with social media, but when you have very little budget for a marketing organization and looking forward, those budgets may be not so big anymore. You have to think outside the box, and social media, of course, provides that outlet. So that's what I would say is start thinking outside the box.
Great, thank you. The next question is, as artists recover from having all of this time off, do we anticipate any changes in productions as they get back on their feet? Do we think shows will be trimmed down in terms of the use of technology and lighting as tours ramp back up? Bruce, you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, what I've heard from a number of artists that are looking to tour primarily in 22, their production is ever more sophisticated and massive. It's interesting. Lighting and video in particular are never-endingly being improved and expanded upon. The technological wonders never cease to amaze me, but I'm old enough to remember when a band would go out and play with a truss and two trees, a pretty minimal lighting rig. Today everyone's got 400 moving lights for goodness sake. So I don't see production getting smaller. There is a concern on the part of major artists that they want to make sure that their crews are safe. For the moment, a major artist can literally get off an airplane from the airport, fly into backstage and walk onto the stage without really encountering anybody. But their crew's been there for 12 or 14 hours. So I think that once we are all confident that everyone, audience, crew, and artist is safe, then there's no end to how big the production will be.
That's great. That's good to hear. Does anyone want to add before I move on to the next question? Great. Okay, the next question is, do you foresee ticket prices increasing noticeably or drastically as organizations and companies try to regain what they have lost? And this was posed to anyone.
I'll take that if you don't mind. Our industry has become very good at dynamic pricing. So for the last 3, 4, 5 years, prices change to meet demand. It's a simple economic model. If your sales are soft, you lower your prices. If your sales are strong, you raise your prices. I don't think that model is going to change dramatically. I do think in the short run, you will likely see lower prices to induce audiences to come back. But that's really going to be a show-by-show decision. Some shows are going to have such pent-up demand that their prices are likely to be similar to what they were last March. And other shows are going to want to encourage audiences, both local and visitors. So I don't think there's a single answer to that question. I do believe that no one's going to raise their prices to try to recoup past losses. That doesn't make any sense. They're going to raise prices to improve current profits.
If I could just jump in for a second, I just would quibble with the premise of the question insofar as the lion's share of the money from the box office goes to the artist. It doesn't go to the promoter or the ticketing company or the advertising firm involved. So we're not in a position of raising ticket prices that we make. We wouldn't get appreciably more money by dramatically raising ticket prices. So the money would fall to the artist, and the artists are very sensitive. They want to retain their fan base and expand upon it. So I think that in the short term, to Elliot's point, I think in the short term, I think ticket prices may actually go down a tad.
I like hearing that. I'll take that as an answer. What is your view on artists such as Taylor Swift and their recent business actions regarding performing more virtual events to maintain their fan base? That's kind of what you guys were just talking about, to maintain their fan base during this time. Do you think this will be a new normal, or will there be more of a hybrid, or do you think artists are eager to go right back into live performances?
I think they're eager to go back to live performances. We have been trying to still book some virtual activities or events, and it's getting quite hard as other parts of the country open up and those artists are able to go to those parts of the country. They're not so much willing to do the virtual. And, I'm a concert goer myself, and there is nothing like a live concert. And I think the fans know that. And, of course, the artist knows that. But I think I think the smart ones are going to have some virtual interaction that remains, because they don't want to lose those fans, right? Taylor Swift's one of those big artists that adores her fans and is always talking about how much she adores her fans. So I think she's definitely one of those artists who's going to try to do a little bit of both. Of course, she's also known for doing those big, really big, super big tours that make her lots of money. So I think it's going to be a mix.
Yeah, I think that the communal shared experience of watching an artist perform on stage will be with us for all eternity.
So yeah, and I totally agree. I will add one sort of caveat here, and that is thinking about industries who don't quite have the fan base of some of the industries we've been talking about. So classical music, for example, regional theater. I think there are opportunities there for those arts organizations to really think about how they engage with their audiences and the communities of which they are a part, right? So it doesn't mean, to the point that Bruce was making, it doesn't mean that the live performance goes away. That won't happen, right? The arts will endure. But I think that, remember, many of these organizations, or orchestras and dance companies and opera companies were struggling or kind of coming to terms with changing economics and changing models of consumption even pre-pandemic. So many of those trends are going to be accelerated or have been accelerated, and in some cases exacerbated by the conditions that we've experienced. But I think one of the ways that some of these arts institutions, smaller ones, can really re-engage their publics is by taking advantage of the virtual opportunities there. It kind of reminds me of the point that that Kelly was making, and how she was seeing folks from Michigan and California and Texas and so on, and that might there might be also, even thinking locally, a way in which the pre-concert talk, for example, as a musicologist, I've done many dozens of pre-concert talks in my career. Maybe that's reimagined, right, as something that is more engaging, happening in a virtual format, and then that provides a kind of foundation or jumping off point for the music that you hear, or the play that you watch. So maybe talkbacks, right, in the traditional sense, are reimagined. So I think there are some opportunities there in that space as well.
Great. Another question just came through. Do you think we as an industry should be developing and focusing more on outdoor theater productions, having them held throughout the year, not just in the summer?
It rains in a lot of places. It gets cold in places. I mean, I hate to belabor my Latin American roots, but it rains in Bogota every time I'm there. Every show I've had in Bogota, it's been pouring rain, and it makes for wonderful, performances by. I saw Madonna in the pouring rain, but it doesn't make it easy to produce a show outside of a segmented, a specific time period. So it's hard. It's hard to go outdoors. I love it. I think we all love the outdoor entertainment experience, but you can't do Shakespeare in the Park in January, or not easily.
And to that point, virtually every time I've been Shakespeare in the Park, it's rained. And in addition, there are 41 classified Broadway theaters, most of which are landmarked. We've got to put shows in the theaters. Otherwise the business goes away.
Excellent, thank you. This has been a great conversation. I want to end this on a hopeful note. I would like to ask all of you what you are most looking forward to about live events returning. I'll start because I'm very excited for Broadway to return. I'm very excited to go back into a theater and just feel the history of it all. I love that feeling of being in a classic theater. Kelly, I'll throw it to you.
I just love singing along to my favorite songs. Quietly. I'm not that loud person in the back, but that just listening to your favorite performer perform live and making that connection. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Great, Bruce. How about you?
I like to brag that I've seen 15 minutes of every performing artist, every musician in the world. Which isn't quite true, but I've seen an enormous number of concerts, as you might imagine. But there is nothing quite like standing in the audience when the Rolling Stones or Jay-Z or Taylor Swift go on stage, the roar of the crowd, the audience surging forward, the shouts, the response back from the artist on that stage. That first 5 minutes, to this day, brings just goosebumps to me. I love the way shows begin.
Tracy?
I'll speak to the outdoor performances. We cannot wait to welcome people back to the different parks and the areas, and just welcoming back the artists to come together, and knowing that our programs could be as small as 200, but as big as 5,000 people coming together in the different parks. So we're just looking for the energy outside and together. But we do ask everyone, just be safe and just continue to be engaged with us as we are engaged with you.
And Elliot?
Well, I'm in theater 75 or 80 nights a year, and I miss every one of them. It would be hard to pinpoint the one thing I miss the most, but I will tell you the one thing I'm looking forward to is a chilled martini, second floor bar at Sardi's with my friends, colleagues, and family.
That sounds great. Dean Geary, what are you looking forward to?
To me, it comes down to one word, maybe it's two words: the sound, right? I mean, just for all of the creativity and inspiration that can go into a virtual experience and watching something online, there's nothing like being just enveloped by the sound of, whether it's actors projecting or, in orchestra, playing a forte passage, tutti. I think it's those moments, kind of to Bruce's point, that are, that kind of create goosebumps and are those unforgettable moments that, that characterize live performance and that make it such a special communal experience.
And Chancellor Malloy, what are you most looking forward to?
Well, I can relate to all of the panelists' comments here. I'm a big music fan. I've been a big music fan since I was in high school or junior high school. I've seen many, many concerts, certainly not as many as Bruce. I love the theater. I'm certainly most looking forward, though, to this university getting back to normal with students everywhere, with activities everywhere, with with a livelihood in this city, in this great state university that's now over 70,000 students across New Jersey, and all the things that go with it, all the things that happen in Mason Gross School of the Arts, all the things that happen in the scientific labs, and really, it's just been an incredibly unusual year. But I also would say that as we are returning to normal, and I again remain extremely optimistic given the science that's happened, I do think that these kinds of conversations that we're having and these kinds of relationships that we have with alumni that work in different institutions and in different communities in New York, internationally, is something that we at Rutgers should try to leverage and take advantage of. We have fantastic students with all kinds of diverse cultural backgrounds that can be employees for your companies, Bruce and Elliot and Tracy, and of course you all know that. But we also have talent around the university in all kinds of areas, and of course Dean Geary can speak to Mason Gross, that also can be potentially something we could leverage or invite artists in to share their journey to our students. So I would really like to try to break down some silos that we have between the ivory tower and the real world. I do try to do that with students with internships and co-ops and different experiences, and really hope that we can, to the audience that's listening to us as well, to think about ways that the university can really be relevant, impactful, because we have fantastic students here.
Great. We can't end it on a better note than that. I want to thank everybody who is attending this event. Thank you for being here tonight. And on behalf of the Rutgers University Alumni Association and Rutgers University at large, I want to thank our panelists and our co-moderators for this excellent discussion. Like we said at the beginning, this has been recorded, so it will be up on the Rutgers University Alumni YouTube channel soon, and we hope to see you at future events. Everybody stay well, thank you, and have a great night.
Great, thank you all.